This is David Cowen with Careers and the Business of Law. I have a very special guest today, Sean Fitzpatrick, the CEO, Global Legal at LexisNexis. When I booked Sean as a guest for the show, little did I know that he would be creating a strategic alliance with Luminance. 200 million contracts meets 200 billion legal documents. Congratulations, you're a new father. Sean, welcome. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's been a
So
while
this
since
is a
anyone said that to me.
Yeah, I'll bet. So I listen, I really do think this is interesting. I know I don't normally start the show like this, but I think this is and I don't know if it's a transformation moment or a sustaining innovation moment. We'll get into that in a minute. But what you've just done with this strategic alliance, just to create some clarity for the listeners today, Luminance is 200 million contracts. And what I think of, this is my take, and then you'll give me yours. That's a commercial intelligence. How were contracts negotiated? How did these deals get done? That's like kind of a what and a how on 200 million contracts. And then we marry that with 200 billion legal documents. And you add 4 million documents a day onto your platform. You put those two things together, and the community, right? If you're, a practitioner here, you're going from 2 buttons to 1 button, or 2 tabs to 1 tab. So that seems significant to me. Can you walk us through that from your background, from where you sit?
Yeah, it's an alliance that really came at the request of our customers, right? And so, a lot of customers were using the Luminance product, which is a great product, but it doesn't have the repository of authoritative legal material that you were describing, the 200 billion plus documents and records that we have in our system, the constant updating of that information, with over 4 million updates to that every single day. And, customers just saw the value of bringing those two things together. They asked us to do it. We teamed up with the Luminance folks. They've been great to work with. We put together an integration, and it's just launched into the marketplace. So we think we've got a real nice market fit here, but we'll see what customers have to say. That's always our approach. And then we'll revise it going forward to try and create more value for them.
I want to frame this up in a Clayton Christensen frame, if that's okay, in the innovator's dilemma, the difference between sustaining innovation, 10 and 20% increases, and disruptive innovation, which is much more significant. And so I'm going to take your background and introduce you to the audience and say, you undergraduate Notre Dame, MBA from Ross at the University of Michigan, 3 years at McKinsey, 10 years at Arthur Andersen, 20 years climbing the ladder, if you will, or the jungle gym at LexisNexis. So you're no stranger to the sustaining, disruptive, transformation, innovation. Can you just, take off your LexisNexis hat for a moment and just put on your, Ross School MBA hat and your McKinsey hat and explain to the audience what's going on here?
Yeah, our strategy has been the same for a long time, more than a decade. And, a couple of key elements of that strategy are we always want to be using the best available technology to serve our customers in more modern and relevant ways. And another component of it is we want to have must-have content that you can only get from LexisNexis that's essential to the practice of law. We want to integrate that content into those technology solutions and integrate those technology solutions into the workflows of our customers. And I think that's been the innovation path that we've been on for like I said, more than a decade. In 2022, the end of 2022, when ChatGPT went mainstream, that was the transformational moment, right? So our strategy didn't change. But the tools, the best available technology, that changed. And that changed, it was a step change. And so that's really what's gotten us into transformation. And I believe it's changing the way that people practice the law. And it's not something that's going to, it's something that already has. It's in law firms, it's in corporations, it's being used by attorneys, it's being used by judges. It's here and it's now.
Pretend you're talking to a high school audience and explain to them, if you will, what's a step change?
I would say a step change is more than just normal innovation. It's when there's some sort of a catalyst. In this particular instance, it was the technology that allows you to move forward at a substantially accelerated pace relative to your normal pace of change.
So one more question on that. I'm going to turn the dial one more time and say, if this were e-discovery, right, what you've just done and what's happening in the market right now, right, these kinds of strategic alliances, not just yours, but others, what's similar in the e-discovery space, right? So if somebody's come from e-discovery or legal ops, right, which is a significant portion of my audience here, how are you doing similarities? What's the similarity and difference between what you're doing and others with these strategic alliances right now? How do they view this or sense it?
Well, we don't do a lot in the e-discovery space, so I can't speak to that specifically. I think for us, what we're seeing is our customers are looking at their workflows, which is just the set of activities that they do to get from point A to point Z. And they are identifying new ways to do things, to automate things along that workflow path.
Yeah.
So for corporate customers, you can kind of break the tasks down into three groups. You've got things that are repeatable, that are rules-based, and those you could just purely address them through automation. And then you've got a second group of tasks that are more judgment-based, but they can also benefit from technology. So you can accelerate those. You can get better outcomes by combining them with technology. And then there's the third group, which is just the pure thought leadership, deep analytical thinking, those types of tasks, which are human-only tasks. And I think what we're seeing is in those first two buckets of tasks, the AI technology is just allowing us to do things with our customers today that we couldn't even imagine doing 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, what I like about that so much is you're talking about two things. I think you're talking about three things, which are three of my favorite subjects here when we talk about the AI dividend. You've got productivity and efficiency. You can do the same faster, and then you can do more faster, which gives you a capability. So you go from productivity to efficiency. Now I've got capability that I didn't have before, which in the AI dividend leaves you time. And that time allows you to contemplate. One of the things that allows you to do is contemplate growth and opportunity. I don't know about you, but I find myself with 2 more hours a day, every day compared to 2 years ago. I've got 2 more hours on the side of my desk. And with that, 2 times 5 is 10 hours a week. I find myself thinking out loud about what could we do? What could we do differently? What could we do better? I'm finding growth and opportunity. And I also have a little time to play golf with my dad. So how do you see that framing out?
Yeah, well, I was just talking to a GC the other day, and she was talking about this same thing, right? She's got 10 more hours a week to do things now. And she said in her case, she worked for a large manufacturer in the aerospace industry. In her situation, she said, I've always believed that if we did a deeper dive on warranty claims, we could really impact the amount of money that we spend on warranties. We just approve them because we don't have time to review them, right? And that costs a lot of money. Now I can take some of those 10 extra hours I have every week, and I can invest it in something that turns my organization from a cost center into a revenue profit generating center for the organization. So that's one thing I would say. The second is what you're talking about with better, faster, cheaper. Everybody that I talk to seems to be in agreement with that. Like there's no debating that you can get efficiency out of these products. But there's another element in legal, and that's trust, right? It doesn't matter how efficient you get. If you can't trust the system, you can't use the system. And so there's a real emphasis now, a shift from just better, faster, cheaper to trust first.
What do you think about the AI dividend? Let's take it from a LexisNexis point of view. How are you using your dividend? Do you have a dividend? Are you reinvesting it? Are you saving it, reinvesting it, using it? How do you think about it? I know this is it's an interesting question. We talk about this at Solid all the time, right? Solid, whether
Yeah.
it's Silicon Valley or Chicago or New York or Atlanta, we're always thinking about what's the dividend, how do you measure it, what are the benefits, how do you think about it, or have you thought about it? Your own personal dividend.
Yeah, so we're not just using AI to serve our customers. We're also using it to revitalize our own back office processes. We're using it in sales. We're using it in marketing. We're using it in engineering extensively. And we're absolutely seeing the benefit of that. For us, in our situation, we're a growing business. We're growing very quickly. And so the way that we're using that dividend is we are able to grow and do more work without adding additional resources. And so with additional work and additional growth, that drives additional revenue. With no additional resources, it doesn't drive as much additional cost. And therefore, we get the increase in profitability. We just, not just, but we announced our December 31, 25 results for the full fiscal year. And, growing faster than we've ever grown, highest profitability we've ever had. So we are one of the companies that's been able to take AI and actually monetize it in a profitable way.
So we're talking margin now, and when you talk to, which I think is I think it's compelling. I don't know if that's getting enough attention. People talk about reducing costs a lot. I think the market has a maturity right now. Reducing costs is still maybe 60 or 70 or 80% of the market's like cost reduction, where
Yeah.
I think the more advanced, more mature portion of the market is thinking margin and or growth. What are some of your clients saying to you around margin? Because I think reducing costs is already there. We got that. Margin growth, which is what you just said. What are your clients saying to you about that? Do you have a good story for us? Or a
Yeah,
bad
I don't
story?
see
I'll
them.
take a
I
good
don't see
story, a
them.
good story or a bad story.
Yeah. No, I don't see them reducing costs. I actually see most of them growing their cost base, but they're growing their cost base at a rate that's not as fast as they're growing their revenue base, which is driving additional margins. And part of the equation here is they can get more work done in less time, and so they're creating more value than they were creating before, and they're creating it in less time. And when you have a billable hour model, what that means is you can typically charge higher rates. And so we're seeing kind of high single digit increases in rates for law firms.
So I'm going to ask you a crazy question, okay? If you
Okay.
if you could go back and bring your 35-year-old McKinsey self to the office today, right? You're like about 30, if you're in your 30s at McKinsey and you brought him
Yep.
to the office
Yes.
today and he looked around, what would 35-year-old Sean say as he walked into your office?
Well, you've come a long way. That was I left McKinsey, just so people have perspective, in 2005, right? So the early 2000s is when I was there. And, the internet, boom had, just kind of happened, 5 years before that. The first time I saw Google, I was actually a summer associate at McKinsey, right? So that's how long ago it was. And boy, has it come a long way since then. I mean, I think I would sit that young Sean Fitzpatrick down in front of a computer, and I would pull up the latest technology, and that's what I would show him.
Looking around the corner, I want to shift to talent for a moment. Um, the talent that you look for. Two questions. One, what do you look for today? Right? CEOs have to talent spot and talent slot. So whether you're spotting internally and slotting internally or externally, what do you look for today? Right? And I ask you this question so those that are listening can hear a CEO's point of view of like, okay, here's what I look for. Right? So kind of informative. And what role doesn't exist yet that's on its way in the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months that you see emerging in the market?
Yeah, I mean, we look for, the same things that we looked for in the past. We look for integrity, we look for passion and energy and drive and competence and all of those things. But what's different that we look for today that we weren't looking for a couple of years ago is what I would call AI fluidity. Some people call that like an AI native mindset, but if you're an AI native, you're only 4 years old, right? I mean, if you think about kind of the current version of AI, it really hasn't been around that long. But what I'm looking for is not people that necessarily grew up on generative AI, or agentic AI, but people that have found the fluency, that have the passion for it, that are really interested in trying to figure out how they can take this technology and use it in the most relevant ways. That's really what we're looking for. And then you also
I'm
asked about a position that doesn't exist today. So let me answer that one. I think the manager of agents position doesn't exist today. Today we have managers of people. I
yeah.
think in the future you're going to have managers who have a whole workforce of agents that work for them, but no other physical employees.
Yeah, I think I've heard that from a number of people. I don't know one of those yet. Do you?
I don't. No. I think they're still yet to be hired.
I'm on the hunt. I'm gonna look for an agent manager to interview. I think I'm gonna make that a part of a part of my Q3 hunting expedition. I know that I know we're tight on time, and I want to close strong. So I do want to know sports. Love. I know you went to Michigan, and I know you went to
Yeah.
Notre Dame, and like you couldn't have possibly have gone to Notre Dame and the University of Michigan and not got bitten by some sports bug. So two questions: one, favorite sport to play, favorite sport to watch, because Notre Dame and Michigan, you've got to be torn. What's up?
Yeah, so I don't play any real sports anymore. I do a bit of hiking, I guess that could be considered a sport. But back in the day, football was my sport. And in terms of watching, football is still my sport. That's the one I love to watch. And if it comes down to a Notre Dame versus Michigan game, I'm always rooting for Notre Dame. I think your passion for your undergrad always stays a little bit stronger.
Fantastic. Sean, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Congratulations on the strategic alliance. Any final thoughts you want to share with the audience? 25-year-old, 35-year-old starting out their career. Any guidance or book you want to recommend?
Yeah, I would say, in terms of guidance, as an attorney, the most valuable thing you have is your reputation. And it's always important to choose your partners wisely. But right now in the era of AI, it's even more important to choose your partners wisely. So I would definitely recommend that they focus on that. In terms of a book, there's a book called Shoe Dog. It's the biography of Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, and it talks about his journey. And it's just an incredible journey. It's a great business story. And then, of course, you recognize a lot of the characters that played a role in his life, which is also a very interesting part of the book.
Yeah, I'll double tag on that and double dip on that and go. Shoe Dog was a great book, and for me, the reason why it was so great is it was so inspiring. The risks he was willing to take early in his career, getting on a plane, going to Japan, going to the unknown, which is I think where we live today. I think there's a similarity, a parallel to getting on a plane, borrowing some money, and getting off and going to Japan to bring some shoes in. Who did that? Nobody. I mean, that's where we live today, though. You've got to take some risk. If you're at a point in your career where you can afford to take some risk, this is the time to do it.
When you're early in your career, you can afford to take a risk, right? You have plenty of time to recover. I think that's great advice. I would take more risks. I would advise people to take more risks.
Fantastic. Sean, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I look forward to seeing you either at Clock in Chicago or at one of the other shows coming up. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this show, be sure to give us a like and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your shows. And if you want to take your career from now to next, never eat alone.